So without further ado, I call the first speaker for proposition. That's Peter Tatchell.
As many of you will know, Pride London began in 1972 as a protest against homophobic, biphobic and transphobic laws. It was very much our community challenging straight society and demanding respect, dignity and liberation. Many people feel that by comparison to 1972, Pride today has become overly commercialised, bureaucratic and rule-bound. An event which often reflects the wishes of the city authorities, not of the LGBT plus community. The admirable organisers of Pride in London are increasingly being forced to operate within onerous controls and draconian costs. These have been imposed by the Mayor of London, Westminster Council and the Metropolitan Police, who have dictated conditions that mean that last year a mere 26,500 people were permitted to participate in the Pride in London parade. This is a fraction of the number who would have marched if it was a free and open event. Nowadays, because of the bureaucracy set up by the city authorities, LGBT organisations have to apply 3 months in advance to participate, pay a fee, and get wristbands for all their participants. So for many people, the parade feels increasingly regimented, commodified, and straitjacketed. The city authorities are also enforcing punitive costs for road closures, for pavement barriers, for policing and security. They cite safety concerns and the disruptive impact on West End businesses if the parade was allowed to be larger. So it seems that commerce comes first. Pride is not allowed to interfere with making money. Now, I think these excuses are untenable. There are plenty of large political marches in central London, such as the NHS protest last weekend, and before that the anti-austerity and anti-racist marches. These marches are stung for none of the costs that are forced on Pride, and they have no safety problems, despite their massive size. Equally, no similar restrictions are placed upon the numbers at Notting Hill Carnival, which is many, many times larger than Pride. So the dedicated Pride Committee is being held over a barrel by the city authorities. They might be permitted to increase their numbers on the parade, but only if they stump up loads more cash to the council and the police. Westminster Council seems to think that the democratic right of the LGBT plus community to use its streets should come at a price. It even demands compensation for the suspension of parking bays. And Royal Parks is no better. They won't allow Pride to use Hyde Park. We are being denied the democratic public space. Compared to 20 or 30 years ago...
On this point, wouldn't you say then that Pride is even more meaningless today because it is needed because of these things?
Say it again, sorry?
So, wouldn't you say that that actually means that Pride is even more important because it actually faces these challenges that need to be overcome?
I totally agree. Because of these challenges, that's all the more reason why we need to support the Pride Committee, challenge the city authorities, and demand a Pride on our terms. Compared to 20 or 30 years ago, Pride has, in my opinion, sadly been somewhat depoliticised. For many people, it is now mostly a gigantic street party. That may not be the intention of the organisers, but that is the way it has transformed. The big corporations see Pride as a PR opportunity to LGBT plus consumers with their flashy floats. The ideals of the LGBT plus community are barely visible. Last year, I counted only 10 parade groups with an LGBT plus human rights message. And one of them, the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain, is now subject to an investigation by Pride to decide if they should be allowed to participate in this year's parade. And this is the result of protests against the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain by extremist Islamist organisations who are misogynistic, homophobic, and whose some of the members are anti-Semitic as well. Plus, of course, the East London Mosque, which is no friend of the LGBT community and no friend of LGBT Muslims. So I do think we need to have a rethink. Pride is at stage by an amazing unpaid all-volunteer team. I accept that some corporate sponsorship is necessary to fund it. I haven't got a problem. It's just about the proportion and the prominence of that sponsorship. The parade and festival need to be funded, but I think the corporates are now too dominant. And of course, if you think like that, then it is down to the fact that we collectively have failed to be engaged and involved in Pride and failed to give our support and commitment to change things. 1972 was a carnival march. It was a fun parade, but it also stood for human rights. There were no restrictions like we have today. There were no costs, no red tape that is currently strangling Pride. So my view is, let's put liberation back at the heart of Pride. Let's reclaim it as a political march with a party atmosphere, with no limits on numbers, no motorised floats to avoid the cost that involves. And this would dramatically cut the cost for Pride in London to put on the event. It would reduce all the bureaucracy. It would return Pride to its roots. We can still have a fabulous carnival atmosphere. It worked in 1972. It can work again now. Thank you.
I would now like to invite the first speaker in opposition of the motion to come and speak.
Very slim, so I can't toss it. Right, Mr. Chairman, members of the House. I think the points we've just heard are totally valid, and actually it's quite nice to hear about Pride in London as a volunteer-led organisation, because it is, and there's some amazing people behind it. But the motion today is, this House believes Pride has lost its meaning. And I think what we haven't heard is, what is that meaning? I think we touched upon it towards the end, where we talked about reclaiming Pride to what it was, but that, for me, starts to invoke notions of nostalgia. And if that's the world we're going to live in, we should start watching TV only on a Saturday night, not use Netflix. We should not hail cabs on our phones, and we should not communicate with each other on Facebook or on Twitter. The world has simply moved forward, and Pride, as a result, has moved forward with it. So if we look at Pride and its very meaning, the 100-odd volunteers at Pride in London came together and put together what is Pride on post-its. And these are kind of hundreds of them, well, 800 or so. But there were 5 that I'm going to call out. Pride means honouring all who fought for equality and marched before us. Pride is free. Pride is when I feel part of a real community in London. I am the majority, not the minority. Pride is a platform for change, and Pride is giving the next generation the power to come out. So if you look at the meaning of Pride today, it means so many different things to so many different people. And that's something I think we need to be mindful of today.
Point of information. Pride, if it excludes C and B, the Council of Ex-Muslims that Peter has mentioned, and the Pride Committee, I understand, is threatening to do, then it's not giving ex-Muslims who are also gay, and ex-Muslims have the double problem of coming out. They have to come out as atheists and risk death as atheists, and they come out as gay and risk death as being gay as well. So on 2 counts,
Sure.
there's 2 sets of laws in many countries one of which Pride looked at, the attacks on people in Chechnya, mostly people of Muslim origin who were being killed in Chechnya.
Yeah.
But Pride has taken a position on not engaging with CEMB.
Make sure to keep your comments brief.
And I think that's a really good point, and I think that double coming out is something that I have a lot of sympathy for, because I think I skipped the first one, but I did the second one of coming out as a gay Muslim. And I think when you look at Pride as that platform to allow that debate, how it happened last year, rightly so, had some controversy around it, and that's being dealt with and that's being moved forward. I think that's something that's part of the discourse of Pride. And that leads me on to the point about Pride as a magnifying glass for actually what's happening in London as a city. If we think about 1972 and what London was like then, I would love to have bought a house in 1972 prices. It's fair to say London has moved forward in quite a big way. And so when we talk about Pride on our own terms, the terms of the fabric of our city have changed. Things have become more expensive. We are having to look at more corporate lives in order to survive and maintain a living here. And what's more, when we talk about Pride as a PR opportunity, it's actually thinking, haven't we reached an amazing world in which people can be themselves and be out at work? And by being out at work, they can take their company to the parade and not live split lives. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked when people look at the sponsor floats and the brand floats go by, which are only 11% of all of the floats that you'll see at Pride, and all of the parade actually. So I think there's kind of a bigger message and a bigger thing we need to talk about, which is what is happening in London and what is the significance of Pride within that, and who owns that significance. And I would argue that actually, based on all of this, that meaning of Pride is up to the community to decide. And it's not just LGBT+, it's also our straight allies who have come to play such a big role in the movement and how far forward LGBT rights have come today. So I think if we look back to the motion, and I would encourage everyone here today, and it's heartwarming to see so many people who already oppose the motion. I think those on the fence, ones I'd like to encourage over to the opposition a little bit, is to start to think, well, if you look at the very meaning of Pride, who should be the one to define that? Should it be the founders on whose shoulders we now stand and are able to march? Or should it be the people now who are able to grab a bit of that, CEMB included, and say this is what Pride now means to us, and help us to define that? And with that, I would argue, and I'm aware I haven't got the second flag, but I'm going to move fairly quickly. With that, I would argue that Pride has not lost its meaning. If anything, we need to uncover what that meaning is, and we have to all do that together.
Can I just point out, as organiser of Pride for CEMB, the silence has been really abysmal. So
Sure.
Every email I've sent, the nearest, this is over 6 months, have either been totally ignored, the ones to Michael Slater and Alison Carrots, not even acknowledgement. Multiples have been sent. The nearest we have to any response have been fobbing us off with excuses, passing us on front of people. Ozzy was very good, but now he doesn't even respond to WhatsApp messages that I know he's getting them. I think it's
Can you please keep your comments brief when giving points of information?
Sure.
So it
yeah,
really should be. I mean, it's really good loud stuff.
Yeah, and I totally hear that, and I think to the point earlier, which is about this is about the motion and the broader context of the meaning of Pride. I think I hear what you're saying as a volunteer-led organisation, as someone who's come in newer to the board, who's really mindful of what's going on. That is changing, and that will change very quickly. But I'm sorry to hear that that's the case so far, because as the point was before, Pride is the platform, and that platform is so important. And I think together we have to work out what we use that platform for and what the meaning of that is, because it has come a long way. But again, because it's so many things to so many different people, it's not up for one person to tell you what it means. It's up for everyone together to do that. So with that, I'd like to encourage you to look at opposing the motion today.
Before we move on to second person speeches, I would just like to remind people that if you are going to make a point of information, it should be a brief question generally relating to what they've just said. There shouldn't be a sort of background information like stretching out when giving a point of information. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Trudy Howson to come speak in proposition.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Actually, I'd like to respond to a point you made, which is the key point about pride. What is the meaning of pride? The meaning of pride, I believe, through my experience and my life, and actually my hopes and my dreams, is about our community. And by that I mean all of us, all our wonderful, diverse community in the whole world, with no one being excluded. And I'm absolutely in favour of supporting us and fighting against discrimination. What I fear is that pride hasn't so much lost its meaning. London Pride has lost its way. It's become a corporate jolly. I mean, I think it's wonderful that it's been able to raise so much sponsorship. The sponsorship raising has been stupendous. But what's been left behind is actually the grassroots organisation, who we are. We as a community are the treasure of Pride. When Pride in London made the bid to get this 4 years lease of running Pride, one of the deals they said was that they would work with an independent organisation, be guided by them, have them as a moral compass, of which this chap mentioned. And actually, there wasn't any communication. Pride just went ahead and did what they're good at, which is generating corporate money. You know, we're more than corporate and commercialisation. We're a much richer community than that. Yes?
I was the chair of the advisory board that was independent to Pride London, and it definitely was a cohesive and consultative relationship. That was for 2 years ago.
Okay, I think that's not actually the response that came from that organisation this year, which is, everyone can read that online. I think what was disappointing is that one of the basic premises by which they got the bid was that they would be contributing towards the organisations that support us, the grassroots organisations that support us. Anyone can look at the financial records and you'll see that 1 year they donated £261 to LGBT organisations, and the next year they donated £340. Compare that with Brighton, which was £106,000, or Manchester, which was £140,000. You know, where did the money go? What is the money for? What is our does our community deserve to make us flourish?
I just wanted some clarification, simply because Pride in London is free, and Brighton and Manchester you have to pay to get into the Pride event. So that funding has come from paid ticketing, which you have. So obviously Brighton Pride this year, they're going to have Britain Tears, you have to pay.
But Brighton, actually, Pride is not free. As someone who organises events, all the performers work for free, including the professional performers. But actually, if you want Pride to advertise your event, you have to make a massive donation. I think the sponsorship and corporate sponsorship on Pride is absolutely huge. So what I'm saying is, if we're going to make money, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but first, top of the list must come our community, supporting our community. And my other fear is that what happens on, for example, on the Trafalgar Square stage, is that don't get me wrong, I love the boys, but it can't just be the boys, it's got to be the girls too, and it's got to be the people of black, Asian people, ethnic minorities. We need to be integrated and all of us working together. This is the year of the woman. Women of every race need to get equal opportunities. And I include that in the march. There was a reason this year why the BI group, one of our most marginalised groups, were initially refused to go on the march. It was because the march all the places had already gone, and 50% of those places went to corporations. It needs to be more equal. We have got to nourish our grassroots organisations, because otherwise we're just going to become like elitist, commercialised, just trying to be as prestigious and smug and thinking about money as possible, where the heart and soul of our community is in the grassroots organisations that that nurture us, actually, that support us. And Pride in London needs to support those organisations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'd now like to invite, thank you, Trudy. I'd like to now invite Jackie to give the final speech the speech before the summary speeches for opposition.
Thank you. So, listen, I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to this kind of things. I have been around for a few years, but the way I look at this kind of thing is Pride is one of those kind of events that brings us together as a community. It brings us together in more ways than anything else. I went to my first Pride back in 1983, but what I look at, the aspect of where we've come on from this journey, is where we were and where we are now. Where we were was very much a political lobbying sort of aspect, where we wanted to get those messages out to government, to the officials, to be able to say, we exist. The Pride of today is a celebration. It's a celebration of who we are. It's a celebration of all things what we want to be able to get into this space. It brings everybody under one umbrella to really, really come together under one space. I look at the aspect of where we were, where originally there was no aspect of anybody from, say, civil service, where I work in myself, and I know as a civil servant that I can really, really enjoy myself in more ways than I've ever been able to do in my whole life. I look at the fact that we've got the military involved as well. I hear what we've actually said about the fact that the costs of this has gone up astronomically. But what we've actually got to be able to do is something that has brought us in to be able to be engaged. It's brought us in to be engaged in a way that allows every single one of you here and every single one of everybody that goes into it. I see families, I see friends, I see everybody coming under one umbrella to really, really celebrate the aspect of what we're about. I hear the argument where we talk about things like sort of everybody's got to apply for different things. But isn't that a good thing? Because then we know who we've actually got coming along. We see the different aspects of military. We see the different aspects of different major PLCs coming along to this aspect as well, and really allowing for that authenticity to flow in where we're about. We talk about the costs of road closures, but what does that also do? It brings in people into the city. I mean, how many people came into the city over the last few years? I reckon hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have come into the place to be able to be a part of that day and celebrate it with families, with friends, and be able to bring more money into the city, which absolutely brings it into where we want to be able to do. We talk about other marches that have actually brought sort of donations into different companies. We talk about the fact that London gave donations of £261 and £340. We talk about Manchester of 160,000. But what has London done? I think London has done a lot more in this space. It's been able to give the aspect of realism, of absolutely opportunities for all. We talk about, has it done enough for grassroots level and being able to do that aspect? I see it that it has done, brought in grassroots. As a trans woman, I didn't feel a part of Pride many years ago. Now I feel a part of it, and we're seeing more and more people from grassroots getting into that aspect. We're seeing more of the younger generations get into that space. We're seeing more of the actual older generation where people once before were not able to be a part of it. And that has given me real hope that where we want to be able to get to. I've seen changes in a major way as an organisation. I've seen changes where we are as a people. I've seen the aspect that what Pride actually brings is not just about our LGBT community. I think it's brought more than that. It's about who we are as a human community, about who we are with authenticity, about who we are because of who and what we're about. We can celebrate, we can engage, and we are at one. We talk about the fact that we don't do enough to bring in, we should be bringing people more from a black community and stuff like that as well. I get that. But as somebody who, again, sees what I'm seeing, we're seeing more and more people in this space being able to be a part of this and get to where we want to be able to get to. Hearing what we're seeing, it's becoming very regimented. I like it to be regimented because I've got the military colleagues right at the front of that board as well, being able to do these kind of things as well. So, sorry, I know that's a bit sort of what I'm about, but I just want it to be a celebration of who we are, and I think that Pride in London gives it a message of who we are. I don't have much more to say at this time. I want to be able to pull back, but, as I say, open to any kind of questions as well that come forward and welcome it on.